So let's turn to the state with the most to lose from a halt to live exports, Western Australia. 50% of the cattle exports to Indonesia come from the West, and with the live sheep trade, the industry's worth $500 million a year to the state. The Premier, Colin Barnett, joins me now from Perth. Welcome to 7:30.
Yes, good evening, Chris.
Now, your Agriculture Minister's heading off to Indonesia on Sunday. What's his brief?
Yes, he is. Terry Redmond, the Agricultural Minister from Western Australia, will be going to Indonesia. First to look at the situation directly himself, but also to talk to the importers and the abattoirs and the government in Indonesia to reassure them that this trade is important to us as well as to Indonesia, and to work cooperatively with them to try and get this trade restarted as quickly as possible.
Well, the Commonwealth clearly has jurisdiction over exports, so what conceivably can he do?
Well, the Commonwealth may have jurisdiction, but they have not handled this issue well. I think all of us would agree that the images shown on Four Corners were just horrific. That was animal cruelty. And animals, and particularly Australian animals, should not be going into those abattoirs. But the vast majority of animals exported to Indonesia go into abattoirs which meet the international standards, and that trade should be resumed immediately.
Is there anything that you can do beyond urging the Commonwealth to do that?
Well, we're not prepared in Western Australia to simply sit on our hands and wait for the Commonwealth Government or a bureaucratic process out of Canberra. That's why Terry Redmond will be going to Indonesia. We need to reassure the Indonesians that we want to see this trade restarted. Every day that goes by means there's the risk that Australia, and Western Australia in particular, could lose this export market. And there is no doubt that the actions of the Commonwealth Government have offended Indonesia. There's a lot of fence-making to be done.
Have you spoken directly to the Prime Minister about this?
No, I haven't, and indeed the Commonwealth Government did not consult or discuss this ban with Western Australia at all. Now look, we understand that the Commonwealth has control over export, but that's no reason why we will simply sit here in Perth and not act. And I think by Terry going there, we'll reassure the Indonesians, and hopefully that will play a role in getting the trade underway. We will cooperate with the Commonwealth. They did need to act. They needed to stop cattle from Australia going into those essentially backyard abattoirs. But to stop the whole trade overnight, OK, they've done that. That's history. But we now need to get it started, and we see no reason why that trade can't restart immediately. The animals can be electronically tagged, they can be monitored right through the process so that we make sure every cow, every animal from Australia goes into an approved abattoir and is properly accounted for. This is too valuable a business, and it will have a devastating effect on northern Australia. Look, in Western Australia alone, there are probably 100,000 cattle currently at some point in the supply chain. And if they don't get exported, you know, the outlook in terms of animal welfare for them is not good at all.
But you do appreciate that the Prime Minister says that there are two things that concern her. One is that they do go to those approved slaughterhouses, and the second one is the tracking of the animals, and there is no certainty about either of those things at the moment.
No, and that's what Terry Redmond will be looking at when he goes there. And we want to reassure ourselves as a state government that we have the highest standards of animal welfare. And he will make the case when he comes back with the industry that most of the abattoirs will presumably meet that standard, and with electronic tagging and tracking, the trade can resume. Look, if this trade doesn't continue from Australia, we will have no influence on animal welfare in Indonesia. The animals will simply come from Southern Africa or South America.
Do you think that it's inevitable, though, that we will see an end to the live export of animals?
In the very long term, that might be the case, but bear in mind, in a country like Indonesia, I think only 10% of the population have a refrigerator. So it is not a chilled meat or treated processed meat market. It is basically slaughter and sell through markets. So we have to accept the cultural and social reality and the economic reality of Indonesia. Now, working with them to improve standards, not only in the ones that meet the standards, but other abattoirs is important. We need to keep that work. But simply walking away is a dreadful measure to our most populous and closest neighbour, and it can have a devastating effect on the industry. In Western Australia alone, up to 7,000 people work in this industry. Perhaps a quarter of the cattle stations are actually Indigenous, owned and managed and staffed. So the implications for regional development and for northern employment are very, very great indeed. Can I emphasise, Chris, I accept the Commonwealth needed to act. They did. That was a horrific situation, but they have overreacted, and now they need to work with us, with the state government, with the Indonesians, to get that trade started, and started immediately.
Just briefly on this point, are you surprised that the Agriculture Minister or the Trade Minister or the Foreign Minister isn't making the journey that your Agriculture Minister is making?
I am. I'm disappointed. They should be. And, as I say, in Western Australia, we don't sit around. There's a problem. We recognise that. It affects our state more than any other state, so we are going to roll our sleeves up and get directly involved in support of the industry, but also in support of high standards of animal welfare. You've
just returned from Europe and you're saying that there the Commonwealth's Minerals Resource Rent Tax is seen as a real disincentive for investment. If that's the case, why are we seeing so much investment in Australia?
It is seen as sovereign risk. Australia has always been seen as a place of secure investment, and this is seen as an ad hoc, random change that is affecting perceptions of Australia. We're seeing a lot of investment in Australia, and particularly 70% of the resource projects are in Western Australia, simply because of the enormous impact that China and some other countries is having on the demand for commodities. When that demand moderates, then we might not find it so easy to get these projects underway.
Are you at all interested in joining perhaps the High Court challenge against this tax?
If there is a High Court challenge from the mining industry, the West Australian Government will most likely intervene in support of that. This mineral resource rent tax is the most clumsy, inept example of public policy I have seen in 20 years. It's flawed in its economics, it shows a lack of understanding of the mining industry, it is discriminatory, and of course it just happens to be the case that 65% of the money will be collected from Western Australia. We're getting a bit tired of it.
Just briefly, Premier, it seems you agree with the Commonwealth on almost nothing. Sounds almost secessionist.
No, that's not true. That's not true, and indeed I helped Julia Gillard get her health reforms through.
Premier, thank you.
Thank you, Chris.